Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke and today is the 21st of March, 2025. Nice day, windy, more seasonable here where I am. A little bit chillier today, but it's really not supposed to be that warm yet, not as warm as it's been. But March is kind of a weird month. And I'll give a couple people a chance to join before I jump into the things I was going to talk about today. Just want to see who's on and who's here. And Alex is on. Good morning. Good to see you. And actually, I'm probably going to be sending you and Sam an email later today. But yeah, it's and Alistair's on. Good morning. And yeah, it is very, very interesting start to Aries season, I think. I had absolutely crazy dreams last night. And one of them I am going to talk a little bit about today because it's kind of setting up the other thing that I was thinking about talking about this morning. And that had to do with, I was talking about a little bit about intermediaries and intermediary spirits, because there's like two different things that I was thinking about this morning. And so one has to do with this dream that I've had. And the other has to do with a video that I saw yesterday. Because I think I mentioned yesterday that I was watching a little bit of Dan McClellan's channel. And only because his videos, because of some of the topics I've been looking up, they've been kind of popping up in my feed. And I like his thing because what he does is he finds stuff on social media. He finds videos that people are talking about the Bible, or they're talking about different things. And what he does is he says he will basically explain whether or not what they're saying in the video is true or not true. Most of the time it's not. So he's kind of clarifying things, and he does it from the point of view of like biblical scholarship, more of the what we would call more of the literary variety, because what he's doing is he is doing translations and saying when certain phrases appear and people say, oh, this means this and this means that, he's like, well, actually, this is the phrase in the original. This is how it's used in the Old and New Testament. And yeah, I really enjoy that person's content. It's funny and enlightening. Yeah, it's a pretty good channel. And like I said, it just kind of came up in my feed by accident. But and I'm sure he's somebody I've seen at conferences before. I mean, his face is familiar to me, so I'm sure I've been at AAR or something, because AAR and SBL tend to meet together. So he's probably I've probably seen him somewhere. Maybe I've even been to a presentation. I have no idea. I had to drop AAR, I think probably around 2021. So I haven't, because it's very expensive to belong, and I just haven't, and I haven't had a chance to go to conferences or anything, because I used to do a lot of that. But he did have a really interesting thing, and it's it has a lot to do. And good morning, Suda. It has a lot to do with basically what his thing has to do with. Oh, the topic that he had was whether or not Jesus thought he was God. Okay, but I'm going to get to that topic in a minute. What I wanted to talk about first of all was about this dream that I had. So the dream was very odd because it was like I was going into some area. It was almost like it was in a basement of a place, like you had to go down steps of this building, and there was this room. It was like a stone room, and it seemed like it had a place that could have been like an altar or something like that. And good morning, Kelsey. Good to see you. So I have this. So I was kind of, I walked into this space, and I had this, so it was like almost this altar type space. And I remember in my head thinking, this is a really sacred and important place. Like there's something about it I knew that was special. And I felt what I needed to do was I have the candles I have at home. I have a Archangel Michael votive. So it was really kind of this kind of candle that I went and, because the whole room was empty. So I went and stuck this candle on there. It was lit, and put it on that altar. And it was kind of like I was outside kind of walking back and forth, but then I turned around and I could see the glow of the candle. And of course it's a red candle, and it's one of the jar candles, where it has the images on it and so forth. So it was quite big. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, that candle's quite low. Because I remember it's literally, I do have one like sitting right over here in my room, and it is actually quite low. So it's almost like in my mind, it was the same candle. And I was like, oh, I should put a new one in and maybe just move that other one over and have a brand new one to sit up here. So apparently I did this. But when I went to go put the candle down, it was like, I don't know, it was like there was rocks or debris over this other table or altar space. So I had a hard time finding a place to put it down. And then I turn around and there's this woman who's kind of coming in, and it's almost like she's somebody who cleans the space or something. She seemed like an older woman. And I should note, by the way, that this particular altar space was in a building, and what was above me in this building were office spaces for the church. And it's so this, and so we had this altar space from the church, and it was underneath these offices. And so I had kind of had a feeling this woman was kind of connected with these offices. Like she came in and, I don't know, cleared the place or cleaned it up or did something like that. So she comes down and I almost get this feeling like I'm not supposed to be in there, right? But I put these candles in there. And she kind of turns around and she looks at me and she says to me, oh, you must be here because you're interested in the 1990s. And I'm like thinking to myself, no, I have no interest in the 1990s. 1990s were probably some of the worst years of my life. But what color was the stone? It was all gray. It was a gray room. And like it was hewn out of, I don't know, regular gray rock, I guess. And good morning, Joanne. Good to see you. We're just talking about this dream I'm having, or that I had. And so, okay, so then when I left the space, I kind of felt like I was walking through, it was almost like it was in a cave underground. And I was like, I'm not really quite sure of my way out because it seemed much darker outside of there. But eventually, and then I passed this woman, and then it was like, okay, there was like a door to a stairwell, right? So I go in that and I go up these stairs, and I know I'm kind of going up into these church offices. But what's so weird is, first of all, I'm walking through them barefoot. And secondly, I'm realizing everything's a mess, like glass is shattered. Like there's just stuff blown up everywhere. And so as I walk in, it's like, holy crap, like this whole place is an absolute mess. And there was some guy, it was a couple there. It was like a guy who was like this blonde guy and this woman. And it was like he was like kind of dressed, like they were dressed like to be going out or something. But he was on the floor and he had kind of longish fingers. I remember he had long fingernails, which was kind of weird. But he was trying to rake up the glass and get it out of the way. And they were kind of like, oh yeah, there's a lot of glass here. You kind of got to. And I remember thinking like, that's really dangerous to be doing that with your bare hands. Like, there was other people walking around with brooms trying to clean things up. But I was walking through and I was like, okay, this is really weird. But it literally looked like the whole place had been like freaking bombed or something. But I managed to get to the edge of the offices and I opened a door and I'm walking into what's a living space. Now, this living space is kind of round and there's people, it's like there's a walkway, a rounded walkway, and I'm like going up the stairs and going around this rounded walkway. But there's laundry everywhere. There's like shirts, like people they were wet and people were like putting them everywhere to dry. Like it was that kind of a thing. I remember picking up one of the t-shirts. I don't remember what it said on it, but just thinking like, oh, was this a shirt that I'd wanted or something? It was just something like that. And so I was kind of folding it up. And when I looked down, there's a family watching this massive big screen TV. And what they're watching is this, I mean, they're watching something that's a comedy because they're laughing. And I kept thinking like, oh, I think I've seen that show before, So I was just kind of walking up there. And it was a huge family down there too. So I walked up there, and then I was kind of stopped by this boy. Now this is funny. I've seen this boy in dreams before. He's kind of a Hispanic boy, and he's a little on the chubby side. And he said to me, "Oh, did you lose anything in the hurricane?" And I was like, "No, I didn't think so." And he was like, "Oh," so he's showing me upstairs, and water is almost ankle deep upstairs. And there's boxes everywhere and there's cardboard boxes, but it's like people are like trying to salvage their stuff after a flood. It's like that kind of a thing. And I was like, oh, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, this must be Hurricane Sandy. But that was 2012, right? And I don't know why that came into my head. But then I found myself also thinking about 9/11 for some reason. And Alex is saying, oh, yeah. And I was thinking 9/11 for some reason too. Now, by the way, just as a kind of a side note to this, Wednesday when I went up to the university to get myself organized, for some reason, I had two entirely separate conversations about September 11th. For no good reason. One was in HR. The HR woman was telling me for some reason, I think we were talking about time. And she had just said, oh, when I was on 9/11, this is where I was. Like, she worked in New York at that time. And so it was just like really odd. Like, why did 9/11 come up? And then it kind of came up again in the dream. But I do know the other day we had been talking about that whole theory about the world ending in the 90s, or, was 1999 really the end of civilization? And now are we living in some kind of quantum, approximation that's a hologram? I mean, we've talked about these kind of theories. So I don't know if that's influencing the dream material at all. But they all seem to be points in time in 2012 as well that are like apocalyptic points in time. Which, it may not be the events themselves that are important, but the idea that they're representing some kind of a big cataclysm, and it's in a space that is connected with traditional religion. And it's not a church, it's offices of the church. And I think that's a big difference there. It's offices of the church, but they are a mess. There's shattered glass everywhere. But downstairs in this place, I'm like, this is a sacred place. There's nothing here. And the old woman asked if you were there to talk about the 90s, or if I was there because I was interested in the 90s, right? And I was like, what does the 90s have to do with this space? Nothing at all. But to me, this was like a really, really, it was a holy place, but it's almost like it has all this bureaucracy on top of it, and it's kind of forgotten and it's empty. So by sticking the light back in there, because I did a number of readings on it, obviously, when I got up. And all of them, it was so weird because Cartouche, I did Osho Zen, and then I also did Crowley Tarot. All of them gave me almost exactly the same cards. And it's weird because the outcome in many of them is the 10 of Cups, okay? Or even the Ankh in Cartouche. It's this idea of moving into this different kind of space, but a lot connected with Mars energy. I had seen a number of the things that were connected with Mars, and the Tower came up in every single one of them as well. The idea that there's a tearing down, but there's something that's whatever's being torn down, what's going to replace it is going to be emotionally satisfying, not just to me perhaps, but to the whole community. Sounds like most organized religions. Yeah, exactly. And it's really interesting because Joanne, I know, did an interview on her podcast with Christine Marvel. And I follow her on Facebook. I'll have to connect with her at some point, and I might even message her, because she posted something yesterday about WOA. She's like, I had some major dream last night, which I don't think she really explained, but she had said, it makes me wonder what's going to be happening with religion. And the fact that she had that dream, and then I was thinking, oh, that's interesting. Something, I had a different dream, but I felt like it was more a family thing or something, And then I was like, this sounds like a dream about organized religion. And so when I kind of, I do my Azrael messages, and I said, because initially I had seen the air card as the factor, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's a change, but it's not a big deal. And I got a big, no. It's going to be a big deal change, but it's going to lead to something really, really amazing and something really good. Like putting a candle with the Archangel Michael into this space. Then I started thinking when I woke up, I'm like, this kind of reminds me of the idea of the Holy of Holies in Judaism, or the temple space, where you had to keep the flame lit. Like that was the whole point of the whole Hanukkah story, right? The idea that sacred flame with the sacred oil had to be kept lit. And good morning, Kathleen. And had to be kept lit. And I was thinking there's been no light in here. It has to be relit, but it's being relit with a candle with Archangel Michael, who represents fire, who represents the South. Like esoterically, you invoke Michael for the South. So I wish I could remember my dream from last night. Terrible at recall, but I have wisps of it, is what Alex is saying. Yeah, I feel like people are having significant dreams right now. But the thing is, the fact that to me suggested Aries energy. It suggested Mars energy, because Archangel Michael really, his Babylonian origins as Michael, it comes from Mikal, which is their idea of Mars. So he has this warlike kind of a thing, but he has this Mars association. So that's the way I see it. It's almost like, and of course, this is happening right at the beginning of Aries season. So it's almost like saying, okay, Aries season, we know Neptune's moving into Aries on the 30th. We know Saturn's moving into Aries on the 26th of May. This is all about, I mean, and to me, I almost feel like this is giving us a glimpse, like something about the old system is going to be like, it's like going to be an explosion. It's going to be dead. And I know I've heard that before. Now, ultimately what that's going to mean, I couldn't tell you. I think it's interesting that I felt the need to light the lamp in there, and the candle was red too. Yes. If I could easily walk over, I'd grab it and show it to you. Maybe I'll show it tomorrow when I'm on. But yeah, it's a red candle. It's a red votive glass jar candle. So there's the red. Right now, like I said, the one that I have, it's probably down this far in the bottom. So that's why I said I wanted to get a new one and put it in. But it has an image of Archangel Michael on the outside with his sword. And so it's, yeah, so it's definitely not only, well, the red would not only be Mars, but that's also Chthonic. The fact that this is showing up in a basement suggests to me that this is very, very earth-centered and earth-oriented. But if you also think about the point of the Holy of Holies is that it connects heaven and earth. Because I kept seeing things about connection, balance, connection, balance. Like, in other words, putting that candle in that space creates that spark, that connection, that divine connection that people forget, right? We've been talking a lot about Gnosticism and the way in which it's both so much symbolism. Yeah, it's chock full. This might be something that comes up in the next dream workshop too, just to kind of get people's individual ideas about what they might, you know, when I can give them the whole text of everything. Because like I said, I have everything written down. I was up really early this morning, just writing all this stuff down, and some dreams from yesterday that I'd forgotten to write down. So yeah, it's really, it's interesting to me, and I'm curious to know what it's pointing to. But to me, we've been talking about what are all these changes with Aries, right? Yeah, and Kathleen says, wow, yeah. What are these changes with Aries coming into these very spiritual places? Neptune and Saturn both are very spiritual. And we did just have a Neptune Cazimi too, which means it was conjunct the sun, kind of on the same, I don't know, I guess you would call it the same longitude almost, that they were kind of on the same line with each other. And whenever you have a Cazimi, whenever a planet has a Cazimi with the sun, it's almost like it brings about an end of a cycle with regard to that planet. And of course, we did just leave Pisces. So to have that right at that point in time, it seems like that's like a double dose of moving out of Pisces and into Aries. You know what I mean? But I don't know. This Neptune and Aries and Saturn and Aries are going to bring about a very, very different kind of an era. Alex says, interesting because you mentioned hurricanes, because the one thing I remember from my dream was a large flush of water and then dry land. Yeah, and that's interesting. Some of the readings I'm doing, it's almost like that fire-water combination that I'm seeing. Like there's a need to balance out that water energy in some way, or that water energy. I mean, Neptune and Aries is fire, water, right? That's those two coming together. And actually today's a Sagittarius moon too. And Sagittarius, if you do tarot, the Temperance card is a representation of Sagittarius. And what is that about? That's about mixing fire and water, or integrating opposites, and which seems to be what this is, because I'm seeing kind of a Libra, kind of an idea about justice, about what's balanced, what's fair, what's karmically correct, what's right. But it also, that's the seventh house is about that connection, about that very important and significant connection. So I think that's just really interesting that's what came up in the dream. So I'm kind of mentioning it here because I just want to mention it somewhere. And then when the months go by and we see where things go, it'd be interesting to look back and say, okay, well, how much of that dream seems to make sense if there is something about it that is pointing to a future thing. I don't think it's like a literal dream in a lot of ways, obviously, but it's like if it's pointing to some kind of a shift, what that's going to look like, and then to be able to look back, because a lot of times you can do that with dreams. That's why I always say it's good to write them down, because then you can go back and look at them and say, oh, now I understand more about what that dream meant. And the first card I got in Cartouche was Anubis, and Anubis suggests to me that that's it's showing you something clearly. So it's not meant to be I don't know, a manifestation of anxieties. It's not meant to be, it's meant to be like Anubis almost has a prophetic element to it, but I'm not going to call it exactly a prophecy, just that it seems to be hinting at where these energetic shifts are going to take place. And Sagittarius is, of course, the ninth house. The ninth house is traditional spirituality, in addition to other things. It's something that has the potential to open things up, because it keeps pointing to, but it's also about freedom as well. So I feel like the shakeups there are going to be shaking us away from traditional ideas that are not going to take us forward, that are not going to take us forward as a species, you know? I'm glad you mentioned this. Thank you, sharing. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, if you remember more of it, you know, feel free to share it with me or not. It's up to you. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear. I'm interested in people's dreams right now because I'm interested to see what a lot of this means. So yeah, so that was my dream. The other thing, yeah, that came up for me was okay. So this video that I watched, which was interesting, which is about did Jesus regard himself as God? And for some reason, this dream was kind of in my mind as I was waking up thinking about this other dream, or sorry, this video was in my mind as I was waking up from the dream. So that's another reason I'm connecting it to this. And what Dan McClellan basically says is he points to I think the phrase in Greek is ego eimi, which is a phrase that's frequently used that kind of implies that I am the Father, or that I speak with the authority of the Father. And because he talks about, I think there was some video that somebody did that all the places that, you know, this all proves that Jesus is God. And he says, yes, but the language there, the fact that that is the repeated phrase, it doesn't imply that Jesus thinks he's God. What it implies is that Jesus, for whatever reason, through the divine name of the Father, is able to kind of be a representative for God, or being able to speak for God in the same way that an angel or an intermediary would be able to speak for God. He said that's the consistent language. And if you also look at what the Septuagint shows for the Old Testament, which is a Greek translation, of course, but the Greek translation is the same phrase. He goes back to the burning bush episode and says there's at least what's implied there is not that it's he calls Yahweh Adonai, because I mean, you're really technically not supposed to say the name of God, right? We do it all the time here anyway, but so he was using Adonai instead of Yahweh. So he would say, okay, Adonai is the one who appears in this burning bush. It is what we think, but actually they're saying no, it was going to be an intermediary. And what's interesting is a lot of the evidence for Jesus being God comes from the Gospel of John. And John is very much a Gnostic gospel. And that's not obvious to people when they first read it. Although if you read all four Gospels in succession, you'd kind of go, something's different about this one. It is much later than the other ones. But what's interesting is that the earliest Gospel that was written, which is Mark, we think of Mark as being the one closest. Like he's the one who may have been like an eyewitness or knew things. And I was another scholar, I was watching another channel. She's like, no, actually, most people try to date that to around 70 CE, which was when there was the destruction of the temple. Okay, the destruction of the temple by the Romans, and that's with the Flavian family. You know, Flavius Josephus is the one who talks about this in great detail. And yeah, the destruction of the temple is a major thing, not only in Judaism, but apparently a major thing in Christianity, because this was another scholar who I was watching on Bart Ehrman's channel. She was saying that the fact that the first gospel seems to come out after the destruction of the temple, even if the dating is not quite right, she tends to think the dating is probably later, but none of it's contemporary with the actual events. Because the people who were part of that Nazarene cult are the ones who thought Jesus was the Messiah, or that he was coming back. They expected him to come back immediately. Like, oh, he's coming back any day now. Let's get rid of our stuff because he'll be here any second. And of course, that did not happen. And then there was the destruction of the temple. So she was saying, I feel like the Gospels were an attempt to rethink and reevaluate, and let's write all this down and let's rethink what we've understood or what we've misunderstood. Okay, because all four Gospels take kind of different points of view. And of course, by the way, there are over 120 Gospels, but there's only 4 that appear in the Bible, the synoptics, the only ones that appear in the Bible, because those were the ones chosen when Christianity became the official religion of empire. So, but none of them are contemporary, even though some of them claim to be contemporary accounts, but they're really not. And but John is distinctly Gnostic, and as I've mentioned, Gnostic idea, there's a lot of different ideas that are Gnostic. It's not as my friend Dan Hanley always reminds me. He's like, it's not an umbrella term. You can't just say this. It's one thing. One church or one thinker. It's a lot of different thinkers. But when we talk about what's Gnostic, generally, if we think about Valentian Gnosticism, we're talking about the demiurge. And remember, I was talking a lot about this in August because this was something Azrael brought up in messages, this idea of the demiurge. And it's almost like saying this is the end of the reign of the demiurge. It's the end of the reign of this lopsidedness. Remember, we're talking about putting things back in balance, this lopsidedness. But I remember at the time, too, Azrael also saying, when talking about Jesus, saying, well, Jesus is really more of an angel, more of an intermediary. That was the way that he had described him, that yes, he is in heaven, that he is an intermediary, like all the other ones. And that his point was supposed to be coming into the world to remind people of their own divinity. Not that he was necessarily God himself. That's kind of almost because this is what Dan McClellan's saying. He's like, it's kind of a misunderstanding of the language to say that he's actually God. What it's saying is that he is an intermediary, like he has the authority of God. He is speaking with the authority of God. But the Gnostic conception of the real Father is what they call the pleroma. And the pleroma is something that is unmanifest. It's like in Hinduism when we talk about certain aspects of the Devi, of Tripura Sundari, the ruler of the 3 worlds, who is unmanifest, the Devi who is unmanifest and becomes manifest through invocation or through action or through some kind of a need to address some kind of imbalance. Like they will take on a face and manifest with a voice. And frequently that voice, if we're looking at the idea of the pleroma manifesting, it will take on some kind of an angelic form, usually, because that's what the angels do. They're intermediaries. They come and they bring messages. Now, in the Gnostic view, Jesus either is Sophia or is kind of sent by Sophia to come into the world to remind people of their divine connection, because the demiurge, because he's blind, he doesn't see it. He thinks his head's in a cloud and he thinks he's the only God. And they're saying, no, everything masculine and feminine are together. They're in balance. And a lot of things Jesus is talking about when he says, I speak with the authority of the Father, of this kind of pleromic energy, when I speak with the authority of the Father. And then people get mad and want to stone him in John, because it's like, well, how dare you say? And he's like, well, how can you say that? Alistair says, Gospel of Thomas is my favorite gospel, has the clearest message to me about our own divinity. Yeah, Thomas is definitely an interesting one. And Thomas, of course, was the doubter in theory in the Gospels. They talk about the doubting Thomas. But yeah, the idea is that what the revelation that Thomas comes to is the idea of like, oh, wait, because what Jesus also says is that, well, the Father's in me just as he's going to be in all of you. And so the idea is that you are, that is a very Gnostic idea, that divinity is in all of us. It's not about me standing here and declaring that I'm God. But when you have a concept of God that says, well, or that you're going to speak for the main God or for whatever, if you have this idea, if you have an idea of God as one, if somebody claims they speak for God, you're either talking about a prophet or you're talking about somebody who has what we would call a Messiah complex, right? Like somebody who, and Messiah, by the way, is not a term initially that has to do with, it's a savior term, but it's more of a military kind of term. It's more the idea of, like, when they think the Messiah is going to come back, he's going to come and, lead an army and redeem the people of Israel. Like that's kind of what the idea of the Messiah is. The anointed one by God to come and, give us our rightful place in the world, right? So the Gospels, and particularly by the time you get to John, is a reimagining, because Jesus didn't come with an army, and he didn't like come back from the dead and just reappear and say, okay, I'm taking everybody with me. Dan McClellan also has a great video on the idea of rapture too, which is also not in the Bible. But there's a really interesting thing, you know, and saying militant stoicism. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, stoicism to me is kind of like is more the idea that we have that, you know, it's kind of the old, we change the things that we can, and we don't, you know, that there's certain things that are part of nature that we have to kind of accept that's how they are. But I think that when we're talking about this kind of a thing, it's interesting to me because there's the idea here of Jesus as an intermediary. So in other words, he is a manifestation. And I think the best way that I could connect this in my mind is to think about avatars of Vishnu, okay, in Hinduism. Because Vishnu his dream is the universe, right? He's asleep. The universe is his dream. He has a lotus growing out of his navel. Brahma comes out of the lotus, and then a world is created. Okay, the world is created that way. And then when Vishnu wakes up, like the lotus closes, you know, he wakes up, then he goes to sleep and has another dream. And supposedly this has happened millions of times. There's been millions of universes. You know, it's not just this one and this time period. But Vishnu's role in the world is to be a preserver, is to preserve order when there's going to be chaos, when there's imbalance, when there's disorder, when the forces of, usually it's the forces of greed or the forces of you know, avarice and being hungry for power, when they take over and create this imbalance, when the gods are forgotten. Interesting that I had this dream before about a shrine that's like a holy place, but nothing's there, and it's like got debris in it, like it's forgotten. That there's the idea that you have to that there's this manifestation that has to take place of something that is inherently unmanifest. And in the case of Vishnu, this is through a series of avatars. Okay. And the avatars do different things, but oftentimes they're doing battle. It's like you'll have some Ashura who has a weird boon, like, you know, oh, I can't be killed between night and morning. And, you know, you have 1 foot on this and that. Like, they have all these weird things because they think, oh, nobody can meet that. And a lot of them are stupid enough to have a thing of saying, well, no man can kill me. But of course, that means a woman can. And they think, oh, a woman can't possibly kill me. Well, it's like, you know, you will have these different avatars that come in at different times. And like Krishna is the one that's often connected to Jesus in a lot of ways. Even though they're not the same, they're not doing the same thing. They both kind of represent this manifestation of the divine that comes in a certain way. But it's not the same as saying they are that unmanifest. It's like they are and they aren't. But in the same way that they are and aren't, we are and aren't. You know what I mean? We have the same thing that they have. And again, I always feel that Eastern religion's a little more instructive in this, because the idea is like, you have a guru, okay? People will do puja to the guru. I remember when I went to see Amma last time, there was a girl in the back going, oh, I didn't know people worshipped her. And I'm like, because what you think is that she is kind of like an idol that people are worshiping. It's like, no, she is the deity manifest. And so puja is done to her. It's that Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmei Shri Guru Ve Namaha. When you say that, that's basically like the Guru is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. The Guru is in the embodiment of the God. Therefore, Tasmei, we bow to the Guru, because you can see the divine manifest. There is that authority of the divine that comes through. And probably it's very similar with Jesus. There's the authority of the divine that comes through. If he really existed, he probably was an Essene. And the Essenes were a very mystical sect. They would have been more about the direct embodiment or the direct experience of God. And this may have been a wisdom that he would have been trying to bring to people. And in doing that, you know, it's like, yeah, he's sort of that unmanifest, you know, the message is coming out through this particular person who is a manifestation. But now if I go back to the Hinduism example, also you have to remember that everybody has that. So if you go to a household a lot frequently in India, if you are a guest in a household, you will be greeted also with a puja. Frequently they'll come in and people will wash your feet and, you know, do an arati and maybe put a garland around your neck. You know, the idea is that I'm welcoming the God in you into the house. It's when we say Namah Shivaya, or we say Namaste or Namaskar. It's saying the divinity in me bows to the divinity in you. But in Western religion, we have this idea that to claim that we have any divinity in ourselves is like, oh, like it's an act of hubris or something, right? Like, oh, you're making yourself God, and that's a blasphemy. And it's no, you're not making yourself a God. What you're doing is you are acknowledging that you have the divine in you, but so does everybody else. It's not just you. It's not like, it's like, yes, it's one astrologer said to me once, it's like, you're special, but so is everybody else. And Suda says, yes, oddity. Yes, exactly. People will do an oddity when you have a guest come in. And I've seen this many, many times when that's been done, particularly when the Swami would come to visit and so forth. But yeah, when you have an esteemed guest, that's something that you do. And yeah, you're bowing to the embodiment of that person as a divinity. And so what Dan McClellan is really kind of trying to insinuate here, or at least what he says, what the text seems to be suggesting, is that that's how Jesus was. It was like he's like almost like an awakening of some sort with certain people. Yeah, I think awakening is probably a good word, because it's the idea that, because certainly, okay, if we want to think about the Eastern idea of reality, they say what we experience as reality is an illusion. And the reality that we actually need to wake up to is the fact that we are connected to the divine, whatever word, divine's kind of a funny word too, because some people have very specific associations with the idea of the divine. There's levels to it though, Hindus aren't immune to megalomania. Well, yeah, there's always the social structure. This is why Vedantic Hinduism tends to be the more preferred method than Tantric Hinduism as well, because Tantra just says good and bad, whatever. You don't have to sit somewhere and fast and do all these things to be enlightened, to experience, because you're still divine. You could be in the most wretched filth and it's still divine. Like, it's all part of the same system. You don't pick and choose and say, oh, well, that's divine and that's not. Like, everything is, and everyone is. But in our system, we are a system that focuses on difference. So we separate. We say, oh, no, this is holy, good, and pure, and this is not. We kind of make these distinctions. Oh, this person is holy and pure, but that one's sinful over there. This is not what I think the essential message of Jesus was. I think it was meant to be a message of it's a message of you recognizing the divinity, because once you wake up to the divinity in yourself, to use the phrase that Michael uses here, once you wake up to that, then it's like, then life looks different. And the way that you wake up to that, again, Western religion doesn't really have a mode for that, except, now, okay, in theory, if you're Catholic and take the Eucharist, that's supposed to be something that does it. But that is never, ever stressed to the average masses, okay? And I don't just mean mass, I'm using mass in the sense of, large group of people. The regular average churchgoers may take communion, and this message is a seed. He says, it's the Eucharist can open the heart space in a way that is different. This is probably a dumb question, but how is Jesus different from a martyr like Joan of Arc? That's a good question. Although martyrdom is something that takes place because one is dying for Jesus, really. Jesus kind of ends up being considered to be kind of the, in the doctrine of the incarnation, there's the idea that he is in other words, he is kind of like he becomes the scapegoat, okay? There used to be a practice of Azazel, the scapegoat, where the people would take the impurities and iniquities of the community and kind of symbolically put them on this, this goat, and then they would send it out into the wilderness in exile to, basically you're taking all of our bad stuff and taking it out of the community. And so Jesus is almost seen as a human scapegoat, okay? Or human/divine scapegoat, however people want to conceive of that. But yeah, he's a scapegoat. And the idea is that he takes on the sins of everybody and then suffers a punishment, and then therefore everybody is now clean and saved of their sin. That's the doctrine of the incarnation. That's the kind of the thing. Like if I suddenly killed the devil, maybe it's more like Jesus is. He has this idea that he is somehow saved, and that might actually be kind of appropriate in that case, because we have the idea of Jesus harrowing hell. like going down and removing people. Jesus died when he was murdered, dying of natural causes versus murdered. Yeah, well, I mean, he was regarded as a Roman criminal. You know what I mean? You know, and that's why he was put to death. And the Gospels give various reasons for why this was, but he's a scapegoat ultimately. That's what the theology says. He becomes a scapegoat, and that is the means of salvation. But in the Gnostic view, it's more like he's there, and yeah, I mean, it depends on how you want to look at that sacrifice. Martyrs, though, tend to be people who are supposed to be awakened to Jesus's messages and then are willing to die for it. So I guess that's where martyrdom is a little bit different. Martyrdom is I sacrifice myself on the altar. Now, in theory, maybe Jesus could be a type of martyr. I mean, if we're thinking about martyr more as an archetype in that way, but like the idea that I'm willingly going to go to my death, although initially he wasn't all that willing to go to his death, that I'm willingly going to go because I am, you know, because I'm going to do this for people. You know, like he'll say, like the whole Garden of Gethsemane scene, you know, let this cup pass from me, but if it's my will, let your will be done. You know, remember that? So there's the idea that this was something that was part of, you know, what was fated. But again, the Gospels, you have to remember, are written years later, and they are reimagining and reinterpreting and rethinking about what's actually happened here. And whether Jesus was crucified or not, I don't know. You know, it's really hard to say. A lot of us more or less assume, like, yeah, there had to have been a guy Jesus and stuff had to have happened. But there's also not a whole lot of evidence from that time period. You know, the Romans were real meticulous record keepers. And there's no real records of a crucifixion of anybody kind of who matches Jesus's description. In fact, the only thing was from probably around 70 CE was Flavius Josephus talking about a slave called Christus, you know, which is not really exactly accurate. It was more like, oh yeah, they worship some slave guy called this. The inverse is also true. If you did something a heretic, only church will divide our reality. Right. And it's kind of like, yeah, well, whatever you do, right, to kind of upset the order, right, like what Suda's point is here, when we try to upset the social order. So you could look at Jesus that way too, as somebody who is trying to, because that was the whole thing. He's trying to wake people up to, no, this is not the way it is. But then, of course, you know, when empire gets involved, then the religion gets co-opted for political purposes. And that's exactly what happened with the Jesus myth. It became co-opted for the uses of empire. And scriptures that were chosen for the Bible, the synoptics, and then also, you know, Acts of the Apostles, the letters, and all of these different things, and even the book of Revelation, were all chosen because they suited the purposes of empire. Elaine Pagels has a good book on this called Revelations, where she talks about all the books of Revelation. And then she says the reason this one was chosen, the other ones more or less say, Jesus will come back and all will be well. You know, everybody will be fine. All the terrible things that are happening, it's going to be okay. But you know, but then the one that we actually have says the wheat from the chaff will be separated, and the sinners are going to be thrown in the fire, and the good ones are going to be. And again, and Dan McClellan has talked about that too. He says that is literally talking about the events around the destruction of the temple, people's worry about the return of Nero. I mean, that had a lot to do with what was going on historically. He says there's nothing in it that suggests it has anything to do with an apocalyptic future. But a lot of people do interpret it that way. But again, Revelation's also very Gnostic. But anyway, we're almost out of time, so I better quickly do our reading for today. So yeah, Five of Swords is the first one. Comparison. That's interesting. I saw this before, and Suda, I think actually you and I had a conversation about the Five of Swords. Yeah, there's this idea of limitation, comparing ourselves, these ideas of perfection. And this might be at the core of things, the idea that we are not capable of certain things, or perhaps we are not worthy of certain things, right? Internally, we are beyond illusion, okay? There's a part of us that knows this, that is kind of divine, that kind of knows this. But the external feeling of which we are aware is compromise. We have the Six of Pentacles. Some people are determined to make it real, unfortunately. Yeah, that's true, Alistair. But it's interesting to see. I'm interested to see where this is all going to go with this new energy. That's the thing I'm interested in. Most definitely, that has generally been the case. And that's why, I don't know, that's why the system as it is cannot stand. So I don't know if it's going to be a new awareness, like people who are still inspired by Jesus and still wish to remain with Christianity, that this is going to be a new re-envisioning of what that religion is, or maybe what it was meant to be. Or, you know, because I think you would have to, in order to break any kind of patriarchal structure, you would have to revision what that is about. And Campbell had said this too. He says, you just need to find the internal inflection in the text and get rid of the temporal inflection, and get to what the real message is there. He says, and then it's fine. You've got it. And he says, and all religions are true in this sense. So yeah, that's kind of the thing there. But in any case, we have this comparison, we have this internal awareness, but externally we compromise. Okay, here's our Six of Pentacles again. We compromise. We feel that we compromise. We know what the truth is, but it gets compromised. Something's changing, and I think people are waking up. Yeah, it seems like something's going to happen, and I'm really curious to see how this is going to unfold. I still think people are going to be very resistant to this initially. Any kind of collective change is always going to meet with resistance first, for sure. But I don't know. There's a big shift, and literally every time it's just kind of like what follows that shift is the Ten of Cups. You know, that's joy. So it's interesting. So yeah, so we have this. So here's our advice card, the Two of Swords, the schizophrenia card. Yeah, drop both. You know, you choose between the head and the heart. You know, you just jump. You just take the leap. You take the leap of, well, you take a leap of faith, but it's not blind faith, because you're beyond illusion. You know what has to be done. So it's kind of like, just do it. Don't kind of waffle between like, yeah, but people say this or I'm that. You know, you don't want to waffle in between. You don't want to tell yourself you can't do it. And our outcome card is the We Are the World. This is this connection to the world. And hello. And Michael, so I saw part of Michael's comment, and I apologize because it kind of went down quick, so I haven't read the rest of it. But yeah, belief. Yeah, I did see you mention something about belief, and the thing about belief is that so we got some weirdo here. It's belief is very much a belief. Okay, faith is weird. Is a belief. Is an acceptance of the truth, no matter what it turns out to be. Belief insists that the truth is what we want it to be, or what we say it is. And Michael says, changes occurring people worldwide. I think I try not to manifest what I think I am. I don't believe it. I think I have been influenced. Okay, so really, yeah, it sounds, Michael, like you're kind of trying to figure out what's really you and what's been put on you. That's the long, hard work of figuring out what are your authentic truths, and what are the ones that you have internalized and you believe are yours, right? And that is definitely one belief. You're right. And the thing is, if you've been raised in a certain religious system, especially whether it be Catholicism or certain, particularly very conservative types of Christianity, or maybe even Islam for some people, it can be, that's kind of really like ingrained into you. I remember growing up and being like, I couldn't, when I was growing up, I was raised Catholic, and I was very uber Catholic. And when I started to have experiences outside of that realm, it was almost like, well, is this the devil deceiving you? Is it this? Is it that? And all of that, it takes years to totally get that fear out of your system, and to embrace new beliefs without templating Christianity over it. You know, you have to people kind of work through it, you know, and it takes a while, because it is something that, and it may be ingrained in our DNA to the extent that if this is part of our ancestral family tradition, that'd be a thing. I have a big email coming your way, Brigid. I have some recent experiences applicable. Good. I'm looking forward to a long email from you. I would love to hear from you. Yes, but our outcome here is we are the world. So this is recognizing our connection to the bigger system. We're not isolated. We're not lesser, you know? that's kind of the message for today. Kelsey says, I was raised in Mormonism and it's taken so much to remove those influences, so much in the subconscious. Yeah. There's definitely the social. It's interesting that we've been seeing with Aquarian energy in particular. That's 11th house. That's the way society influences us. And the question is, it's like, okay, how do we break out of that social conditioning? How do we get to a humanity that has that respect and that honors everybody as having the divine within, however that manifests? Because you know what, when it comes to something that's unmanifest, there's no one, you can't point to one system. That's what we do with monotheism. Oh, well, there's one right way and that's the true way. And you know, and that's the thing. There's not, ultimately, when you're cutting to that level, there's not one true way. So I was lucky my parents were punks. You were lucky. Mine were just mine were super traditional. So yeah. So yeah, if you're not raised with all of that, then that's good, you know, or you know, that kind of a thing. So anyway, we are 5 minutes past time, so I'm going to that Alistair. Yeah, I like that idea too. That'd be very cool. But yeah, so everybody have a great Friday. I will be back. No, Punk is not dead. Absolutely. And I will see everybody tomorrow morning who wants to show up. Minutes are chill, thankfully. Mine are chill, thankfully. Oh, okay. Oh, your parents. Yes. Yeah, your parents are cool. I mean, I met your mom. Haven't met your dad, but I have met your mom. She's very cool. So yeah, everybody have a great Friday, and I will be back on tomorrow morning for whoever wants to join me. So take care.